and welcome to day 11 of the Genesis of Androzani Advent Calendar for 2019. We are here today doing another video for this Advent Calendar, and it's just me this time. But before we get into what that video actually is, patreon.com/Genesis of Androzani. If you'd like to contribute to the channel, we have multiple tiers. These tiers include certain things like early access to videos, not during this calendar from days 1 to 25. However, there will be an extended calendar from days 26 to 31, where patrons will get early access to a whole week of videos that will then be released week by week in the new year to the public. But in usual circumstances, early access gains you access to videos 12 to 24 hours before they become public. Twitter.com/Androzani if you'd like to get in contact with us or see what we're talking about. Sometimes it can get a bit hectic, and sometimes in the wrong circumstances it can get a bit toxic, but in general I really enjoy interacting with all of you on Twitter, and I encourage anyone who wants to get involved to check that out. So now that those are out the way, what is this video going to be? What is day 11 of this calendar going to be? Well, what I have decided to do for this video is I'm going to look at all of the series of New Who that I'm going to be targeting here. It's not every series of New Who, but it's certain ones. I'm going to be looking at particular series of New Who and seeing if there's a way for me to restructure them in a way that I feel like maybe they would work a bit better. There are some series of New Who that I think are perfectly structured, like Series 1 for example. I'd probably say similar things about a few of the others, but there are a couple in here that I feel like maybe if you, in an ultimate circumstance where you don't have anything holding you back and you can restructure a series any way you want, there's certain creative things that I would maybe think would possibly improve a series, at least from my point of view. But of course, you all let me know in the comments what you think of this. I've got my cat joining me for this one. You guys all let me know in the comments what you think of what I do in this video and how I restructure the series, and tell me how you would restructure these series, or any series if you would like. But I will get on with it now, and we shall start with Series 2. So, I am known for being a big fan of the Russell T Davies era, so doing a video like this where it's criticizing is probably not commonplace when it comes to Davies era, because I'm very fond of it. However, I will take a look at Series 2 because I do believe that whilst I really like it, I do think it's the weakest of the Davies era, and one of the reasons why is it's quite possibly because the structure isn't as sound as the other three. So I have chosen to restructure in a way that I think will improve Series 2's quality overall, at least from my point of view. So the way I've done this is that I realize that the way that it's structured in the actual show is done for a reason. However, I will give my thoughts on how I would change it. So, starting off Series 2, instead of New Earth, because we're not counting the Christmas special in this one, but we're just focusing on Series 2 as it is, I would start the series off with School Reunion. I think School Reunion is a much better starting point for the series than New Earth is. Not only because I think it's a much stronger episode, but I think the hook of Sarah Jane Smith's return would be a great thing to begin a series with. And I think, yeah, School Reunion to me screams more appropriately as a series opener than something like New Earth does. Now, I realize the reason why that Russell did this is because he wanted to have the Doctor and Rose concentrated in the TARDIS for a couple of episodes before bringing Mickey Smith on. And I do understand that. However, in hindsight, I think that having Mickey Smith there for either you could do this two ways. You could either have him in there for the whole of the first half of Series 2, or you could not have him in the next two episodes but then pick him up again after. I realise the structure of the series is done a certain way because of that, but ultimately I think School Reunion would be the best option to have as the series opener for 2 rather than New Earth. So the way I would structure it personally, just the way I would do it, is I would have School Reunion first, then I would have New Earth and Tooth and Claw, and then Girl in the Fireplace, and then, of course, Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel, and then obviously Mickey leaves at the end of that. So the first sort of half section, very similar to the way it is, just put School Reunion at the beginning rather than in the middle. I think if you kept Mickey in the team for all of the episodes, so if you had him in New Earth and Tooth and Claw, not only would I think that it could quite possibly improve on New Earth, but there is a potential for stuff you could do in that dynamic. However, I do understand that those episodes are designed to have the Doctor and Rose by themselves, so if that's the case, then you could easily write him out of those two and not have him in it, and then, you know, have him in the start and School Reunion, have them leave him, and then come back and pick him up maybe in between Tooth and Claw and Girl in the Fireplace. Maybe at the end of Tooth and Claw he gives Rose a phone call and says, I want to come on the adventures, or something like that. I don't know how I would do it, but something like that where you allow School Reunion to be the opener. Then after the Age of Steel. Now this is where it gets a bit interesting. This, to me, is very much a fantasy writing point, in the sense that I am doing something that isn't possible given the circumstances that happen in real life, but because I'm doing a video based on how I would structure the series, I've decided to take some liberties and change the series up a bit. So what I've decided to do is to cut the Idiot's Lantern completely, mainly because I really don't like the episode. I think it's really poorly executed and doesn't need to exist. I think it really damages Series 2's arc. And what I would replace it with is whatever episode that Stephen Fry was originally going to write for Doctor Who. Originally, Stephen Fry was meant to write an episode for Series 2, and in an alternate timeline where this restructure is happening, I would have it so that Stephen Fry didn't have the issues that he had, and he got to write an episode of Doctor Who. I think whatever he written, even if it wasn't great, I mean, maybe it would have been, but even if it wasn't great, I'm sure it would be preferable to the Idiot's Lantern, at least from my point of view. So I would cut out the Idiot's Lantern, have the Stephen Fry episode in there. Then, of course, the Impossible Planet Satan Pit, that's staying, brilliant story. Then after that, Love and Monsters. I know not a lot of people would agree with this, but I think Love and Monsters should stay in the way it is. I mean, I personally really like it, but I also think it works as the Dr. Light story, because obviously with the schedule that they had at the time, I know obviously I'm talking about ultimate circumstances, but schedule that they had at the time meant that they had to have a Dr. Light episode, so I would definitely keep Love and Monsters, despite the fact that it is technically a filler. I really do like it. Then after that, I would also remove Fear Her, because, again, like Idiot's Lantern, it's an episode that I feel like doesn't really need to exist. And what I would replace that with, and this is my biggest change that I think would do so many wonders for this series, is I would have Rob Sherman adapt Scherzo, the Big Finish Audio Scherzo, into Series 2. Now, I realise that Scherzo was a very odd story, and it's one that would alienate a lot of people, but honestly, like, at this point in the series, this is the time to do it, the experimental stuff. And I think that whilst you would definitely have to change some aspects of the story to fit the narrative, and have it make sense within these characters, because obviously the 10th Doctor and Rose are different in some ways to the 8th Doctor and Charlie, but I think doing something like this, Scherzo, which focuses on them as characters and makes their relationship feel more complex, would improve their arc overall in Series 2. I think Rob Sherman taking a twist on this romance storyline would really amp it up a bit and juice it, and I think the end of the series would be far more satisfying for some people, I think, at least, if something like Scherzo came before it, because then you have a bunch of very complex subtext to work with. Then, of course, Amigos and Doomsday, I would keep those two as well. So, yeah, that's how I would restructure Series 2. Not big changes, just reorganising so that the opener is School Reunion, so it's a much more stronger foundation. And then removing a couple of the filler episodes I'm not a big fan of, Idiot's Lantern and Fear Her, and replacing them with the Stephen Fry and Robert Sherman episode. And I think if that were the case, then for me, at the very least, I would think that Series 2 would be pretty top-notch if you made those changes, because, you know, the way I see it, ideally how I would have it. So yeah, not big criticism there, because obviously I do really like Series 2, but if I were to make some changes, I would maybe suggest those. Because that's just how I see it. Now moving on to Series 6. Now this is where we really start to pick up business, because now we move into the Moffat era, which I'm far more critical of. So I'm going to be doing a lot more changes from here on. So we sort of warmed up with Series 2, but now with Series 6, we've got to make some real big changes. So Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon I would keep. I know I have possibly said sometime in the past that I do have some issues with that story, especially with how it ties into the finale, but I would keep that two-parter, just maybe change it up considering how the series is going to change with how I restructure it. But I definitely would have a silence two-parter at the start, so because I do think that concept needed to happen, and it's brilliant. So yeah, definitely keep that two-parter at the start. Then after that, I would have Night Terrors. The reason why is because Night Terrors being in Series 6B to me doesn't make a lot of sense, because it doesn't follow up well to Let's Kill Hitler, in the sense that it really doesn't feel right after Amy and Rory have lost their baby that Night Terrors would follow it. It's just a very awkward one to place after. I'm really not a big fan of Night Terrors, and I was considering axing it completely. However, I do slightly prefer it. Not a lot. Like, I really don't like Night Terrors, but I do think that it has better ideas than The Curse of the Black Spot. I think The Curse of the Black Spot is a really bad episode that I would completely axe altogether. Like, it just wouldn't happen. Curse of the Black Spot just completely gone, and replace that with Night Terrors. Because even though I really don't like Night Terrors either, I do have a bit more respect for its ambition in the sense of it trying to be a horror, and it does have potential. So in a circumstance where I'm making some of the more creative decisions, I suppose I would make some changes to Night Terrors to make it more towards what I would like. But at the same time, choosing between the two, I would have Night Terrors shifted to the start, because that makes more sense, and I would have it replace Curse of the Black Spot. Then following that, we have The Doctor's Wife. Yes, I would keep The Doctor's Wife as it is. Then I would have The Rebel Flesh. Now, I've said before that I really don't like the Flesh two-parter story. However, I feel like it would maybe work a lot better if you condense the two parts down to one episode. So, and you know, a lot of people might say that that's a bit too filled to the brim, but honestly, like, I feel like that story really drags on as two parts. So what I would do is I would have the entire story take place from where it starts and up to the point where Amy's flesh cliffhanger happens at the end of that episode, and only have it be one part, because then I think maybe if you condense it down, it might be a less of a drag to watch. So just have The Rebel Flesh as one episode. Then, to close out Series 6A, because we're working within the same parameters, I would have A Good Man Goes to War as a two-parter. And the reason why is I feel like as a single-part episode, the metaphor that they're trying to go for doesn't work, because it doesn't have enough room to work with, it doesn't have enough substance to show for it. And I feel like if you're really going to tell a story about the Doctor and how he's represented throughout the universe as this sort of war hero, I feel like it needs to have more than just one episode. Like, it needs a fleshed out story to really feel the impact of what it's trying to tell you. Because I'm not particularly fond of what we got in the first place. So I would make that a two-parter and really make it a much bigger story. You know, maybe if it had a similar space adventure vibe to something like Frontier in Space or the War Games, and it's still happening within Series 6 and revolving around, like, you know, River Song and all that, but make it a bit more fleshy and as if it actually, you know, it has significance by it being this big story. I think that would work a lot better. So Good Man Goes to War, make that a two-parter to close out Series 6A. Then coming back, I was really struggling thinking about this one. What I would do is I would have Let's Kill Hitler as the return episode for Series 6B. However, I wouldn't have it be a romp. I wouldn't have it be the silly comedy that it is. What I would do is, following Amy and Rory losing their daughter, and obviously the revelation of her being their daughter, you know, let's say at the end of A Good Man Goes to War Part 2, River Song is captured as an adult as well, which eventually leads into the finale or whatever. Just, I don't know, timey-wimey bollocks, but the following of Amy and Rory losing their daughter, I would have Let's Kill Hitler take place in Nazi Germany, but I would have it be much more serious. And what I mean by that is I think that having the Nazis be compared to the Daleks in the sense that they are the human equivalent of the Daleks, and having the Doctor take them more seriously in the sense that, you know, he's really showing that he's trying to present what A Good Man Goes to War should have been like, of him being a war hero, in the sense that he's facing up to humans' almost biggest villain in the Nazis and Hitler, and taking it quite seriously. There's a lot of stuff that you'd have to work out and change about the story, but I feel like Let's Kill Hitler, if you took the chance to tell a story in Nazi Germany that was quite serious, I think you could actually craft something quite interesting. Obviously there'd still be a lot of controversial elements, but I feel like it would be much better than the comedy romp that we got. And yeah, I do really think that having the follow-up of A Good Man Goes to War sort of lead into some more almost introspective Doctor episodes for Matt Smith would be far better than what we got. Because, you know, for example, you have the first two-parter, the Silence two-parter, and then you have Night Terrors, which is a bit of a throwaway episode, whatever, just to warm you up a bit. Doctor's Wife, where he meets the TARDIS. Rebel Flesh, where Amy gets taken, and then, of course, you get the two-parter A Good Man Goes to War, and then Let's Kill Hitler with Nazi Germany, really building up the Doctor's character, really fleshing out Matt Smith. And I would say in the same way that, you know, David Tennant's Doctor was fleshed out in Series 3, just really driving that home. Following up Let's Kill Hitler, The Girl Who Waited, exactly the way it is. I think that's a beautiful episode, and tying that into with how the Doctor is going in this series will be amazing. And the same thing with the God Complex, have it the same way that it is. Love that episode. Now, with the next one, I was tossing up a little bit on what to do, but what I would do is I would have closing time happen, but not with the Cybermen. I think the fact that it has the Cybermen is a really big, burning, bad point to it. What I would do is I would have it as a sequel to The Lodger, but not, again, like, not have it revolve around the Cybermen. Have it just be an episode that, yeah, obviously there's going to be a bit of comedy like there was in The Lodger, but have some more time spent on the Doctor reflecting around the fact that Amy and Rory have just left him, and in his whole arc through the series, you know, tie it into his character a little bit. You know, obviously the closing time is an episode where that really, you know, slows down a bit and, you know, makes it a bit more domestic. I think making closing time a bit more similar to something like The Lodger or Boomtown or one of those episodes would be a good idea, and just really breaking it down to the characters and just fleshing out that part of it rather than it being about the Cybermen. I think that would be a much better idea. And then ultimately, one of the biggest changes I would make is I would also make the finale, The Wedding of River Song, a two-parter. Now, I don't like The Wedding of River Song. I've made that very clear. I think it's an absolute mess. However, if you split it into 2 episodes, you may be able to make it better. And I think that style over substance is a big problem with that finale. I think that The Wedding of River Song needs more fleshing out, more character development, more time to explore the parallel universe and its threat, danger, and its stakes. Also to flesh out River Song as a character. Just everything about that story needs more. There needs to be a bigger story with more explanation, more character drama, and more depth to it, and less silly in style over substance. It's just not right. It doesn't sit right with me, that finale. So make The Wedding of River Song a 2-parter and make it a much more heartfelt story, is just the way I see it. And I think the way I've structured Series 6 there, I think would make it a far more enjoyable experience, at least for me. because there would be more episodes focusing on Matt Smith's Doctor as a character and focusing on the more emotional aspects of him rather than the sillier, rompier aspects that I really didn't like. And just making all the episodes sort of tie together character-wise, I think would be really clever, at least in my opinion. So that's how I would do Series 6. Now we move on to Series 7, and boy, this is a hard one to do. Series 7 has a lot of structural problems, and it was a really hard one for me to work out, especially because Series 7 has the biggest problem with the fact that it has no two-parters, which I'm going to be changing here. Now, I would start off Series 7 with a two-parter Dalek story. Scrap dinosaurs in a spaceship, doesn't need to exist. I would have a two-parter with the Daleks, and not have it be Asylum of the Daleks, not have it be this really stupid, silly Hollywood crap. Make it a much more fleshed out story. I said this before about Good Man Goes to One and Winning a River Song. Just do that again. Like, the same principle. Two-parter Dalek story. Not like Magician's Apprentice either, because that's silly and really bad decision-making, but I would have a two-part Dalek story that explores, again, more character development. You could actually have Brian Williams come on the adventure for this one as well. Maybe just giving him more time with the team too. But ultimately, one thing that I would really like to do in this two-parter, and I know it's not necessarily possible for the realistic circumstances, but creatively, one thing I would really, really like to do is I would like for this story to tease John Hurt. And what I mean by that is it shows John Hurt, but it doesn't reveal that he's the War Doctor yet. But by showing him at the start of Series 7, it basically introduces you to, this is the story arc, or not necessarily story arc, but the mystery box of Series 7 as a whole revolves around who is John Hurt? Like, why is John Hurt in this show? You know, the mystery of John Hurt, like, who is he? And I would have it introduced in this two-part Dalek story. And you could maybe even have it so that at the end of the story, a bunch of Daleks get reduced to dust by John Hurt, or something like that. It's complicated because it's hard to work out the logistics of it, but I really feel like that would be a much stronger opening to Series 7 than what we got. Following that, I would have A Town Called Mercy. I know not necessarily a lot of people like that episode. I really do. And also, going back to what I was saying about Series 6 and having Matt Smith have a continuous character arc, having Matt Smith's having a much more serious, long two-part Dalek story leading straight into A Town Called Mercy, I would have it so that his character naturally blends into this almost losing control of himself, and which would then fall into A Town Called Mercy, which is an episode where he quite often has some problems controlling his anger and his temper and his morals around guns. I really do think having A Town Called Mercy follow up a Dalek two-parter could be quite interesting for his character. And I just really like A Town Called Mercy anyway, so that's the one I would keep. Then after that, I would have another two-parter to close out Series 7A, going with the logic that we have to work with the same parameters of Series 7 being split in two. I would finish off Series 7A, episodes 4 and 5, with another two-parter. I would turn The Power of Three into a two-parter. I would scrap The Angels Take Manhattan because I really don't think that is the right ending for Amy and Rory as characters. I really think it cheapens what could have been. Turn The Power of Three into a two-parter. Flesh out the idea. Do not have the Sonic Saves the Day. Make it a much more longer political unit story with a family drama. So almost mixing together the Pertwee-esque unit story with the New Who domestic story as well. And having a final hurrah for the Ponds and having a big story to flesh it out. Because, you know, The Power of Three is one of those episodes that has a lot of time jumping. And whilst in terms of editing that does work, I think maybe if you could flesh that out into 2 episodes and really focus and hone in on the characters, you could really do something quite special with this two-parter and their last story. And I really think the way that The Power of Three Part 2 would end is with Amy and Rory leaving the Doctor by their own choice and saying that this is the end. It's been great, but we now have to move on with our life. And I really think you could create some genuine emotion from that. And it would be a nice twist in the sense that it's not a death or a dramatic end. It's just a quaint little goodbye. And having an emotional moment where the Doctor really has to accept saying goodbye to them because of their choice, I think would be quite a powerful moment. Then following that, the Snowmen as the Christmas special. I'm not really going to change that one, I suppose. You can just have that one the way it is. Whether Clara appears in the Dalek two-parter or not, I'm not sure. You could, you couldn't, maybe, not sure. The Impossible Girl arc is a hard one to sort of unwind because it's quite a big part of the story. But there are certain things I'd probably change about it if I got into the nitty-gritty details of Series 7. But I would just keep the Snowman as the Christmas special, but maybe change some elements of it, make it a little bit less of that Series 7 Love Wins the Day bullshit that it has. But I would do something with it. I would make it maybe a bit more interesting, maybe add a bit of horror to it, make it connect and feel a bit more similar to the Great Intelligence Yeti stories of the Second Doctor's era. Something like that. I'm not 100% sure on the Snowman, but I would keep that as a Christmas special. Then opens Series 7B with Bells of St. John. I didn't really know what to do with this one. I suppose there's things about the series I would change in terms of how it's executed within the characters, make it a little bit less style over substance and add more heart to it. But that's more of a general thing I would change. But in terms of the episodes, if it Bells of St. John, I would suppose I would keep it. Not necessarily the way it is, but I would keep that episode. Again, just maybe change a little bit up. Just make it a bit more hearty, a bit more beefy, a bit more character-focused, and less quippy. And Rings of Akaten, keep that again. I know Rings of Akaten gets a lot of hate in some circles, and I do see why. Again, I would have the episode happen, but just change some of it to be less cheesy. Just the whole Clara's parents' story. I just wish that one was better. If it was executed better, felt a bit more genuine, if it had a bit of that. Because obviously they're going for the whole Clara's parents being this sort of fantasy of, oh, leaf fell on me and we fell in love and that's how you were made. I feel like if it was a bit more genuine, I feel like it would be a bit more believable. And Clara's end in Rings of Akaten with the leaf going into the sun would maybe feel a bit less forced if there was just a bit more heart to the story. But I would still have that episode because I do think I like the way it explores the alien planet. I think it's really cool. And just have those two episodes, Bells of St. John and Rings of Akaten, to warm up Series 7B. And then from here, this is where it gets really interesting. Because I feel like after this point is when Series 7B really starts to tread water with its episodes in the sense that they all feel the same and they feel like they don't really have a point. So what I would do is there's quite a lot I would cut out, and there's quite a lot I would make into two-parters. So starting off after Rings of Akaten, I would make Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS a two-parter. The reason why, it's one of the best things you could do in Doctor Who is having an episode revolve around the TARDIS, and I think what we got was nowhere near the potential of what it could be. Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS has so much potential, and just making it a grand adventure through the TARDIS would be so awesome, and there's so much creativity you could do with it. So yeah, make that a two-parter. You really could do something quite special with it. Then after that, I would have Nightmare in Silver as a two-parter, and what I would do is, I know that initially Neil Gaiman's idea for this story was 2 parts long, and then it got changed a lot in the writing process when it got made into one episode, and then Moffat rewrote a lot of it. I would have loved to see what Neil Gaiman's initial ideas were for this episode, especially as a two-parter. I think having a Cybermen two-parter in Series 7 would make it feel a lot more significant, and just, again, less style over substance, less of the silliness, and, well, I mean, it's not you don't need silliness, it's just make it feel significant, and don't let the silliness dominate your Cyberman story, if that makes sense. Make it actually part of the story, but not a dominating factor, and making it a two-parter, I think, could again, have lots of potential. Obviously, in Nightmare in Silver, they revealed the sort of new age Cybermen, the fact that they've been upgraded to their next level, which is very similar to, I suppose, the Iron Man suits, in the sense that they're very high-tech. I think exploring the technology behind the high-tech Cybermen and really building it up and showing you the process of it would be awesome. Big, meaty, two-part Cyberman story. And then The Name of the Doctor, I would also make a two-part finale for Series 7. Again, Name of the Doctor, lots of potential, but it just needs more. There needs to be more of it, and exploring the whole Trenzalore plot, making it feel significant, giving it a big, hearty story, more characters, more character development, and just a lot of focus, and making it feel big. I realize that with Series 6 and 7, with the finales, like when it comes to 6A, 6B, 7A, and 7B, I've made the finales two-parters. The reason why is I feel like the Davies format of having longer finales is a much better way to go about it, because it actually gives the episode weight, in the sense that it provides stakes and investment for you to feel the impact of the ending, whereas I feel like the one-part finale doesn't quite have the duration to quite hit that level. So making The Name of the Doctor a two-parter and really, really giving it a big story to work with would be excellent. And then, of course, Day of the Doctor as the 50th anniversary special. And then I would also have The Time of the Doctor as a two-parter, especially this one. This one, the way I would air, I would have it air the same way End of Time aired, where the first part's on Christmas and the second is on New Year's. One of the biggest reasons why is because there's a big lapse of time in this regeneration story. I feel like if you flesh out the story and make it longer, you could really feel the time pass. And then by the end you get to Time of the Doctor Part 2, Matt Smith regenerating would really feel like it was earned. Like there's this big long wait for it. So yeah, and obviously, I will have cut out Dinosaurs on a Spaceship and Angels Take Manhattan and Cold War, Hyde, Crimson Horror. But really, they just, when it comes to Series 7, they just don't need to exist. I'd much rather you flesh out some of these ideas and give them a proper story than just letting them be average. It's just not good enough. So that's how I would do Series 7. I think even the way I've structured it, there'd still be some problems, but I think there would be a massive improvement if you really fleshed out some of these into two-parters. And yeah, really big fan of that style. Sort of making it feel a bit more like Classic Who, maybe. Something that the Moffat era maybe needed. Right, Series 8. Capaldi's first series. Similar to what I did with Series 6, there's going to be a big block at the start. Well, it wasn't necessarily at the start of Series 6, it was more in the middle. But at the start of Series 8, I'm going to have a big block that focuses primarily on the 12th Doctor as a character. The reason why is because I feel like the first half of Series 8 puts a lot of focus on Clara as a character, and whilst I understand why developing the companion is important, I would have much rather they'd done that in Series 7 when she was first introduced. And so when you get to Series 8, you allow the first sort of section of the series to be focused on introducing the new Doctor. And I think that would make it a much stronger start. And so what I would do is I would open with Deep Breath. And yeah, there's maybe some things I would change, maybe a bit more focus on the 12th Doctor over Clara, but there's debates on what you could do with Deep Breath, and that's quite a divisive episode. But I would still have it. I would still have it as the opener. And then directly after that, I would have Listen. The reason why is I feel like Listen is an episode that definitely acts as an episode that's trying to really establish the introspective side of the 12th Doctor. I think having it as his second episode would be a good idea, because you really need to establish that part of the story early on to really hook people into what is this Doctor all about. And also, I think I'm not a big fan of the Clara Danny Pink relationship, but if you're going to have it in the series, I think having Listen be episode 2 rather than episode 4 would mean that Danny's introduction episode would be focused around him. So what that means is that you get a lot of focus around Danny straight off the bat to really establish who he is, and not just the way they did it in Into the Dalek, where it was very off the cuff. So yeah, I would introduce Danny Pink in the second episode, and I would have a lot of focus on the 12th Doctor as a character. There's things, again, debates, because I know that the 12th Doctor's era is quite divisive, and I suppose fairly so. But I would have Deep Breath open and then have Listen directly follow it and really hone in on the 12th Doctor as a character and establish him early. Right after that, so after Listen, then I would have Into the Dalek and have it be a two-parter. Again, coming off Deep Breath and Listen, really, really, really digging deep into the 12th Doctor as a character. Into the Dalek has an interesting idea, but because of the duration and its limit and within its concept, it doesn't quite reach where it needs to. Similar to Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, there's a lot of potential you could have when it comes to Into the Dalek, of exploring the physical inside of the Dalek, but also the mental, emotional, and all that, and the history as well. Using two parts to really flesh it out, to give the 12th Doctor more time to breathe and establish who his character is. And by the end of Into the Dalek Part 2, properly having a grip on who this Doctor is and the dark side of him. The sense that in the first 4 episodes it's fully explored. And by that point in the series, it's very clear who the 12th Doctor is. Because that's obvious what you need to do in your first series, is start out strong and really hone in on the character. Then following that, I would have the Caretaker as a bit of a cool down after those 4 very heavy episodes to start off. Again, that gives another episode to develop more of Danny Pink, because you had Listen and then the Caretaker. But this time it's a bit more lighthearted. Obviously, this is the one where Danny Pink figures out who the Doctor is. So, yeah, I think having the Caretaker after Into the Dalek is a bit of comedic relief, just to cool off the big, heavy first 4 episodes. Then following the Caretaker. So, we've cut out Kill the Moon, because I hate it. Kill the Moon should not exist. Sorry if you like it, I think it sucks. We are going to follow up the Caretaker with Under the Lake and Before the Flood, the story that was that is in Series 9. I know I'm kind of cheating here because I'm accelerating forward and taking something from the future and putting it in the past, but it's my restructure, and in an ultimate situation, this is the way I do it. And the reason why is I feel Under the Lake Before the Flood is far more suited to Series 8 Capaldi than Series 9 Capaldi. And also, having that two-parter in there would get rid of not only Kill the Moon, but In the Forest of the Night. 2 episodes that didn't need to exist. So having that two-parter there, so after the comedic relief and the heavy first half, you have a good sci-fi two-parter, much more essential Doctor Who, really showing off Capaldi as a Doctor, in a Doctor Who story that's more like, something that you would get in general. I think that would be a good idea, having Under the Lake Before the Flood right after the Caretaker. Then Mummy on the Orient Express and Flatline. A lot of people say these are the 2 strongest episodes of Series 8. I'm inclined to agree. I think they're really strong, so keep those as they are. And then I would have the finale take place as a 3-part story. What I would do is I would have Dark Water, the way it is, as Part 1. As episode 10, and then I would have Death in Heaven as a 2-parter. Again, very similar to The Wedding of River Song and The Name of the Doctor. Death in Heaven is an episode that feels like there are some interesting ideas in there, but they're not executed well, not only because I'm not a big fan of Samuel Anderson's performance, and there's a bunch of things that I wasn't a big fan of, but fleshing it out into 2 parts could really help it. I think having it be a proper unit story, a proper Cyberman story, a proper Master story, a proper story for the 12th Doctor and Clara and Danny, giving it all that time to breathe could really make it feel like a significant finale. In the same way that something like The Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords fleshes out all its parts, and then of course Utopia comes before it, which is which Dark Water would act like. I think that would be a much better idea than squashing it all into what they did. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Series 8. Much more focus on the 12th Doctor's character in the front end, little bit of Brit comic relief, some cool sci-fi in the middle, and then a much more fleshed out finale at the end. I really feel like that would improve the series and make it feel much more focused on the Doctor as a character, because I think Series 8, whilst it does showcase the 12th Doctor in parts, needs more of it. We need more of the 12th Doctor's character established early, because it's quite a big sharp direction from Matt Smith, so having that there I think would make a massive improvement. Then we get to Series 9, and I think out of all of them, this is the one I would change the most. This series I'm really, really going to change big time. So, instead of The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an adaptation of the Big Finish audio Davros. It's going to play out very similar. Obviously, you do have to change certain things, like what we did with the shirt. So for Series 2, I would have it change, obviously, to fit the narrative and make more sense. But adapt the Big Finish audio Davros into 3 episodes. I know that may be alienating for some casual viewers, but Davros Big Finish audio is a story that I really feel like would work so well for the 12th Doctor's character. And the way I would have it play out is he's in quite a dark state after Death in Heaven, and whatever, I suppose Last Christmas is there too. I would, instead of the whole guitar tank shit, I would have the Dark Doctor continue over, and obviously he is thinking and processing and changing a little bit, at least, but I would have the more serious Capaldi come into Davros, that story, and I would have the 3-parter really, really explore the characters. And I know that what I'm about to say might annoy some people, but I think if you adapted that Big Finish audio so well as it is in Big Finish, and flesh it out into a TV story and really amp it up, I think this would be a perfect story for Davros to die. I think having the Doctor and Davros have one last story together that's focused on their characters, and have Davros die in the end, would be a really emotional way to start Series 9, because Davros is such an important part of this show and its lore. I think an emotional end for Davros would be so brilliant of a moment for the 12th Doctor, and having that death impact him in such a way that after that happens, he comes home to Earth, and obviously, you know, if we're working within the parameters, Clara has to stay on for Series 9, so after Davros, he comes back and convinces Clara to come back with him on adventures again, and he becomes more friendly, light-hearted, and fun-loving, and in the sense that he lightens up and his mood becomes inspired, and he really becomes the friendly 12th Doctor. Not in the same way that Series 9 executed it, but really bring in the heart and the soul of the Doctor through with this Davros story. Have this 3-parter really be the turning point of the 12th Doctor's character, in the sense that he is so emotionally affected by the death of this man that it causes him to want to become a better person, in the sense that he becomes more friendly. And then following Davros, I would have a bunch of fun episodes, because after this point, you know that he's in a much more lighter mood and he wants to take Clara on these adventures and have a bit of fun. So I would have Robot of Sherwood, and I've obviously swapped that with Under the Lake, in the sense that I think, in the reverse, that I think Robot of Sherwood would fit much better in Series 9 than Series 8, because of this turn of his character, in the sense that he becomes much more agreeable, and, well, not necessarily agreeable, but much more friendly. It didn't fit 8 Capaldi for me. So if you have Robot and Sherwood in Series 9, right after this story, it'd be a nice, light-hearted way for his character to turn. Then Time Heist. I'm not a big fan of Time Heist, but I think if you just comb it out a bit and let the ideas breathe. I think you could do something a bit better and also have a bit more of that fun 12th Doctor in it. Then I would have Hyde. One of my biggest complaints with Hyde in the Series 7 is that I don't like how Matt Smith and Clara make the gothic horror feel silly. But I think with the 12th Doctor, a story like Hyde could work a lot more. I feel like the gothic horror of Hyde could work really well with this version of the character. So Robot, Sherwood, Time Heist, and Hyde. Then the Zygon two-parter. Now, I do have my issues with the Zygon two-parter. There's things I would change about it. But I think ultimately, even if you change the story in a way that improves it, at least for me, the way that I would want that story to be told, I still want to keep it, mainly because I feel like you can't get rid of the speech that happens at the end of the Zygon inversion. If the story that happened before it was better, I feel like I would appreciate the story as a whole more, so I would make some improvements to that. But I think the speech is essential for the 12th Doctor's character, and I think coming off the triple episode Davros with the 3 fun episodes in between, then getting into the Zygon two-parter, that's when the 12th Doctor, after having a few fun episodes, really starts to bring it again, likes to bring the energy, but he's inspired and he's powerful, and it's really hearty 12th Doctor stuff, and by this point he's really firing on all cylinders, and he's at the point where you really feel like you can believe in this Doctor now after all this time, that he's really hit the moment. It's like, this is the Doctor that we know. And right when that happens, face the Raven. Cut out Sleep No More, we don't need it, it's shit. Face the Raven coming right off the speech. Right when the 12th Doctor thought that he had it all and he finally figured it out, Clara dies. And she stays dead. Clara stays dead. Face the Raven's the end of her character. Heaven Sent, the exact same way it is. Maybe some of the hybrid stuff you could change to fit how the narrative would go. But Heaven Sent following Face the Raven. And then, I know I've done this with every other finale, but it's just the way I roll. Have the Series 9 finale be a 2-parter on Gallifrey. Make Hellbent a 2-parter. And instead of doing what they did with bringing Clara back, I think it should be like, there's sort of 2 ways you can go about it. One way is you could make it almost like House of Cards on Gallifrey, in the sense that it's a political story. And the way the Doctor handles it is fueled by what's happened in the series so far. So the way his character has been affected by the events. Or you could have it be like a big blockbuster finale. With a big war on Gallifrey. Or it could be both. There's a lot of things you could do with Hellbent. Just don't have it the way it is. Because the way it is horrible. So that's how I'd restructure Series 9. Then after that, we have Series 11. The most recent series, Doctor Who. There's not a lot I really know what to change with, because it's hard to say, because Series 11's ideas are so bland that it's hard for me to sort of change it without changing the entire series as a whole and coming up with completely new ideas for some parts of it. So I had quite a hard time with this one. However, I have decided to restructure it, which I think will do some benefit. Start with The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Make it a bit more fun and engaging and less bland. Have a bit more style, but structurally the same way it is. Then make the Ghost Monument a 2-parter, make it feel more like an adventure, like a Mad Max sort of thing, or the Keys of Marinus, like one of those quest stories where they have to get to the TARDIS. I think that'll be awesome than just a generic 1-parter. Really making it feel like the first 3 episodes is the journey to the TARDIS, to finding it. Then have Rosa. Tricky on this one to work with, but I think just have it. It is a popular episode. I think there are valid criticisms of Rosa, so things you could change about it, but ultimately I would still have the episode. Then right after that, I would have the Witchfinders. The reason why is I feel like it would fit better if it was earlier in the series than later. I know that it's kind of difficult having 2 historicals happen one after the other, but I really don't think it matters that much. I would have the Witchfinders there. Then right after that, I would have Kablam. I'm not the biggest fan of Kablam, but it's not bad, and I do see why people like it, so I would still have Kablam. Obviously, you would have noticed up to this point, no arachnids in the UK and no Shamburger conundrum. The reason why is I think arachnids in the UK really botches a lot, especially with Yaz's sort of character family thing, and there's a bunch of stuff I really don't like in it. And Shamburger conundrum just doesn't need to exist. It's a pointless load of shit. So yeah, Woman Who Fell to Earth, Ghost Monument is a two-parter, Rosa, Witchfinders, Kablam. Then Demons of the Punjab is a two-parter. Make it feel like the partition of India is bigger than what the episode does. One of the ways that I would do this is I would have the TARDIS team separate into the two different countries, so India and Pakistan. So I would have maybe two of them go to Pakistan and two of them go to India, and it's this massive journey through the countries, and you get an understanding of both sides of it. I would also maybe consider making it a pure historical and not have the aliens, though you could possibly still have the aliens in it, but I would consider possibly maybe having it as a pure historical, almost Hartnell-esque, in the sense that it shows both sides of it and it has a much more political subtext, showing more of India, having more development for Yaz as a character. I feel like this two-part, like this story, really wasted her in the sense that this was the one that they really needed to get her character on point, and I think if you made it a two-parter, you could flesh her out more, give her more personality, more character, really put the focus on her and have this be a two-parter and have the end be a massive impact. Then I would have It Takes You Away. I think It Takes You Away would be a great penultimate episode, obviously the same way it is with the whole Grace plot. Very quirky, and yeah, It Takes You Away would be episode 9. Then I would cut out the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos. The reason why I'm doing this is because I think it's a very weak finale, and there's really no way I could even change it to make it improved. Even if I made it a two-parter, I still feel like it wouldn't work. So I would make the finale of Series 11 Resolution of the Daleks, is what I would call it, because Resolution was the title too short. I would make that the finale. I do realise that having the Daleks in that finale the way it is would be quite a generic way to go. But the thing is, Chibnall obviously decided to go for a much more back-to-basics approach with Series 11. I think he went a bit too hard on it, but at the same time he still did. So I think having the Daleks in the finale would be an easy way to get people invested in the finale. The way I would do it is I would have Resolution sort of happen similarly to how it does, but maybe tie it more into the series and have it be more of an impact on the families that are involved. So maybe Yaz's family. I'm not 100% sure on that though, because I think Demons of the Punjab would be the correct way to do that one. But yeah, I think Resolution being the finale would be a much stronger choice than the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos, at least in my opinion. And honestly, I don't think Tim Shaw really needed to return after Woman Who Fell to Earth. I know he technically teleported away, but it just wasn't worth it. So yeah, that's how I'd restructure Series 11. But yeah, that's how I would do it. That's how I would restructure Series 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11 in ways that I would think would improve those series. So let me know in the comments what you thought of my restructure, and if you think that this would improve those series, or you think they would be the same, or you think it would be worse, or what you would do with them. Let me know. I'd be very interested. This is the kind of topic that's been on my mind for a while, and I think it's nice that I finally got it out there in a video, especially for the advent calendar. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed this one. I certainly did, thinking about it and making it, and I will see you all tomorrow for day 12.